Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Belmont Saga, Part 2, Chapter 13, Lillian of Gamboa. So last week, Paymaster Stenstrom, still a kid, 19 years old, gets his arcane kit out, finished, as his father presents him with his grandfather's set of nth pistols, a very austere looking flintlock style pistols that aren't really too impressive to look at. I mean, they're pretty and everything, but they're hardly anything to strike fear into the heart per se. But that's just let's not be fooled by appearances. The ints can kill anything. You could walk up to someone wearing a full flak vest and stand tall and be haughty in nature, and then take an in shot to the chest thinking your flak vest or whether armored provisions are going to save you. But no, you will die. The nth can kill anything. And if you're wearing armor, it's not going to work because it'll pass right through the armor without damaging it. So after you're dead, the guy with the nth who just shot you can relieve you of your armor, put it on themselves and use it. Unless, of course, they face somebody else with an nth, which is probably not going to happen. And then we also are informed that their boyhood hero, both Stenstrom's and Lyra's boyhood or childhood hero, I should say, the Mad Lord of Walther, was killed by the Sisterhood of Light, and read a news posting discussing the slaying, and they were both very sad. This week, we're gonna have some girlfriendial craziness. We're on a crash course for wackiness right now, I can tell you, as the oft mentioned, but as to this point, not seen, at least not on the surface. Take that for whatever it might possibly mean. Who knows what I mean? I don't know what I mean. My wife doesn't know what I mean. But we meet Lillian of Gamboa, and it's gonna be one hell of a ride. This is a long chapter, so we'll probably need to get to it right now. And it's gonna be fun, let me tell you. And of course, I based these events off of my personal experiences. So everything you can read here, even though it's a science fiction book, actually happened. I promise you. Well, let's begin immediately. Part 3, Part 2. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Chapter 13, Lillian of the Gamboas. Father, we have discussed this, Stenstrom the Younger said as the two walked the southern gardens. The Belmont South Tyrol Manor, once a Marian monastery, sat on a hillside in the distance. With its random placement of white, black, and red bricks, its exterior often reminded Stenstrom of a vast gingerbread house covered with candies. Surrounding the manor were mystic walks lined with pergolas and primitive-looking observatories full of star-watching equipment. They were scattered about the hillside and gardens, some in ruin, others used as landscaping features. The Marians once used the equipment to gaze out at their mythical Star of Marian, one that only they could see. Stenstrom and his sister sometimes tried using the equipment to locate this mythical star, but could never see anything. Virginia said she could see it to the northwest, but he never saw anything but empty sky. Far away, he could hear the waves of the Sea of Esther crashing into the rocky beach. Stenstrom was incensed. Mother had trucked in yet another young lady for him to meet. An annoying habit she'd acquired. Lord Stenstrom the Older laughed as they walked the lovely paths. I know we have, however, it means a great deal to your mother, and besides, it's St. Porter's Day. Good things are supposed to happen on St. Porter's Day. Well, happy coincidence. Clever of her to arrange it that way. Mother has been trying to control every aspect of my life since before I can remember. And additionally, per her insistence and direction, I am to defy her wishes and make my own choices. Therefore, as before, I will not see this woman. Your mother might seem a bit overbearing, and in some aspects she certainly can be. Even so, she does it because she loves you. And, as an added bonus, I think you might like this one. Got spirit, I think. Stenstrom the Younger shrugged. So, who is it today, just out of curiosity? He asked. A lovely young lady from Esther, Lillian of Gamboa. What, her again? I know what you're thinking. Many of the Gamboa ilk have made a name for themselves for being rather homely and uninteresting, but this one seems a tad different. I saw her get out of the coach myself as she arrived. She's pretty and seems a vibrant young lady. Let's take your mother out of the equation for a moment, shall we? She's come all this way across the marshes. The least you could do is spend a moment with her and determine for yourself if you wish to get to know her better or not. It's not her fault you and your mother have this ongoing contest to one-up the other. Stenstrom shook his head. Well, true, but out of sheer principle, I'm not going in there. Mother has to learn that I am not interested in her continued efforts to locate me a bride. She's done that for all the children. She's paired off at least 10 of your sisters, and there was a ominous crack of thunder. As they walked the garden path, the weather quickly began to turn. The clouds grew angry, and a strong wind kicked up from the sea. I wasn't aware of any storms in the forecast today. The two Stenstroms held their hats. This was no usual spring-up of bad weather. The clouds banged into each other like two opposing armies and were red-rimmed. The center of the conflagration seemed to be right over their heads. Sorcery was involved. Stenstrom knew it. Suddenly, a thick, reaching fog sprang up. "Father," Stenstrom said, groping about. "Father!" No reply came. He whirled around in the fog. This was his mother's doing, and he could expect anything to come running out of the mist, ready to put him to yet another dangerous trial. It was amazing to him how many times his mother mortgaged his soul simply to prove a point, sending a rotting host of minor demons after him. Knowing full well he could get rid of them easily with his Ents, weapons that could slay anything set before him. The problem today was he didn't have his Ents. They had been missing from their felt-lined box that morning. Oh, Mother! He thought he could hear the babbling of a creek and smell the stagnant, pungent odor of dirty water and drenched mud. Odd, there was no creek in the area. A few feet distant in the thick fog, he saw it, the tepid banks of a creek that had appeared from nowhere. Something swam in it, something with red, beady eyes that watched him intently from the calm water surface. A huge, demonic creature in the form of a giant catfish came leaping out of the creek with a drenched roar. It leaned on its fins, clambering toward Stenstrom in a malevolent fashion. The demon fish was a skillet full of clashing colors. Its scales were a mottled mixture of awful greens and dead ochres, stretched out over a backdrop of blazing sunburned reds. Its fins were mostly the same shade of blazing red, webbing over a scalloped ribwork of black, oversized fish bones, ending in a rather lethal-looking set of spines. Its reaching whiskers moved about like a slimy mustache. Its catfish mouth was enormous and glowed slightly with a reddish tint from within, as if a great fire burned inside.
"Morning, Lord Belmont,"
it said.
"I have been summoned to ensure you don't forget to see your lady friend today. They ought to keep your appointment, and I get to eat you. Isn't that lovely?"
Lady Jubilee had for many years attempted to pair her son, Stenstrom the Younger, to various ladies of standing whom she deemed worthy. One of her favorite social functions was the pairing of her children off to the various offspring of great houses whom she favored. As Stenstrom was her only son, she threw herself into his pairing with unusual gusto. As per everything Lady Jubilee did, she was very exacting and rather unflattering in her appraisals of potential candidates, having sullied and greatly angered various houses with her blunt assessments and quick dismissals. She was looking for an impeccable pedigree, a comely bearing, and a high degree of knowledge in the finer things and the social graces. Most importantly, Lady Jubilee was looking for a grounded, mundane woman. No gifts of the mind, no telepathy, and no knowledge of sorcery. She thought it important to counterbalance her son's sorceress training. As such, she ruled out the heroic Vith and their gifts, and a good many of the Xenons as well. She wanted a nice, safe Hala girl, or a trusty, earthy Esther woman, and she was no longer on speaking terms with several great houses whom she'd so insulted. She nearly touched off a disturbing social incident when she publicly proclaimed that no houses of Barrow stock were to be considered for her son, the Dares, Cottons, and Tooks, reacting strenuously with a fruitless letter-writing campaign to counter her position. Sorry, no Barrows, Vith, Xenons, Calverts, or Remnas, and no Balwigs either. She didn't trust those bitches and their intentions. Being a founding member of the Balwigs herself, she knew the unflattering way they tended to treat gentlemen. Nothing out of the ordinary for her son. It was quite a shame that she was mortal enemies with the Cones of Remnath, having suspected them of repeatedly trying to murder and abduct her son through his early youth, for they had several daughters of fine quality that met her criteria nicely. Truly regrettable. When a potential candidate did emerge who happened to pass all of Lady Jubilee standards, she would be invited to visit Belmont's South Tyrol estate and be introduced to Lord Stenstrom the Younger. Normally, the lady would be given a fine breakfast and then asked to wait in a large ballroom on the North Manor grounds called the Chalk House for its white limestone walls. Then, Stenstrom the Younger would be summoned and entreated to go into the Chalk House and see if a report was struck. Stenstrom, however, was on a vendetta in this matter. He was bound and determined to show his mother up, as she fervently requested. She herself asked him to be not such a compliant young man, to thwart her will and set himself against her, though she never failed to get angry when he made a showing of such independence. Many times he would not go into the Chalk House at all, simply to annoy and embarrass his mother. Many times he avoided it and allowed the poor lady within to sit all day, unattended, she a victim of their ongoing struggle. Other times he would take one look at the woman sitting there in her gown and walk right back out. As Stenstrom knew, Lillian of Gamboa, a fine Esther woman, had been asked to House Belmont several times. She was reputed to be a bright young lady, the 10th of 15 Gamboa children, usually attired in festive pastels. She was a tallish girl, blonde-headed and blue-eyed. She was a noted painter and sculptress with a lovely eye for color and form. Some of her more ambitious works had sold for a fair amount of money and critical acclaim, and she had a small but burgeoning gallery in Gamboa where her works were admired by all. Lady Jubilee had taken a great liking to Lady Lillian. She personally visited her at her home in Gamboa, had stood with her gallery and marveled at the fabulous works of art she had created, and was generally taken with the lovely young lady. This woman was perfect, so grounded and pretty, so mundane, Lady Jubilee wanted a mundane woman for her son to keep him properly balanced. When dealing with the arcane, it was a simple matter to become lost in it. Having a decidedly non-arcane companion, specifically a spouse, would provide him with the grounding he needed. And Lillian of Gamboa seemed perfect, stately and prim, talented and artistic, but rather dry and humorless. She would do well for her son. Lady Jubilee happily showed her pictures and holovids of her son, Stenstrom, and was pleased that Lillian found him handsome. So, with a hopeful spirit and an open mind, Lillian boarded her house transport and made the trip across the marshes of Esther to Tyrol to meet Stenstrom the Younger. She certainly didn't quite know what to expect, but she was apparently game to give it a try. The afternoon came and went. Stenstrom never showed up. Lillian sat in the huge, empty chalk house all afternoon, alone. Lady Jubilee's rage afterwards was memorable. How could you let that woman sit there unattended? I did not wish to see her. I do not care about your wishes in this matter, Belle. You've your house and your name to consider. After a vigorous set of apologies from Lady Jubilee, Lady Lillian agreed to give it another go. She said there had been a scheduling error and that had been her fault. She begged Lady Lillian to forgive her and please grace them with her presence a second time. Lady Jubilee, with her short head of Tyrol pewter-lock hair swooped in the front, was, above all things, quite ingratiating when she wanted to be, and Lady Lillian forgave the first event. Not being one to hold a grudge or allow an honest mistake to go unforgiven, Lady Lillian agreed and again made the trip to Tyrol to meet Lord Stenstrom. And again he was a no-show. Sitting there alone in the chalk house a second time, the table full of elegant treats, she sat there in her teal gown and felt humiliated. Again she returned to Gamboa, this time in quite a huff. Again there was the dreadful row that evening in Belmont Manor. I am considering making you a guest of our dungeon, boy. Or worse. Mother, you yourself have insisted that I confound your various machinations with wit and stratagem. Be relentless, you stated. What think you of it? Huh? Well, so I did. Very well. Such a position shall force me to take drastic measures. Be at your guard, Belle, and do not forget that you've only yourself to blame for the consequences. Again, Lady Jubilee contacted Lillian of Gamboa, full of apologies, and this time said that Lord Stenstrom had been called away at the last moment on urgent business in Tyrol. Via correspondence, Lillian informed Lady Jubilee that she wished nothing further to do with the House of Belmont, and that was that. She then went on a rather scathing letter-writing campaign, letting any who would listen how she was treated at the House of Belmont, South Tyrol. But apparently, time heals all, and eventually, Lady Lillian sent Lady Jubilee an unsolicited correspondence stating that she would forgive the first two incidents, and for a third time, agreed to meet Lord Stenstrom. She wrote it was becoming a matter of pride with her, and she would make this foolish Belmont lord see her. By creation, she was determined. Full of thanks and promises of a memorable afternoon, Lady Jubilee made the required preparations. Sitting there in the chalk house a third time, Lady Lillian waited, and this time Lord Belmont showed. Stenstrom ran for his soul, the demon in hot pursuit. For being quite literally a fish out of water, the demon covered the ground rather well, pulling itself along on its fins and grabbing passing trees and other large objects for leverage with its whiskers. leaving a definite trail of slime as it went. The beast was clearly steering him toward the chalk house and the lovely lady waiting within. Not having his ends to dispatch the beast, and seeing no other choice, Stenstrom made a break for it. He flew into the chalk house and slammed the door shut, rattling it in its frame. Outside, he could hear the maelstrom of wind and angry smoke. He thought he could vaguely hear the demon tittering about, waiting for him. If he came out of that ballroom alone, the demon would have its prize.
Come out here, Lord Belmont. I have been promised your flesh.
He turned and looked into the interior. The chalk house was a large, gilded ballroom used for select occasions. Nether Day, Valentine's Day, and other special events. It had been made especially for Lord Belmont and Lady Jubilee, being built on the site of an old Marian altar. It was rather modest in size as far as Grand League ballrooms went, but it could still hold several hundred people rather comfortably. The floor was made of rare woods from Hoban, and the walls were covered in fine pink and yellow silk paper. His mother had designed the print herself. When she wasn't busy summoning demons and plunging knives into his chest, his mother had a delicate touch for decorating. The 4 massive chandeliers hanging over the ballroom floor were priceless. Lady Jubilee had good taste. Sitting erect on a padded couch at the far end of the hall was a slender young woman wearing a festive pink gown. She had golden blonde hair that was done up in a partial bun, with long, slightly curled tendrils hanging down past the nape of her neck. Her face was nicely painted, her bare back was provocatively curved, and her blue eyes sparkled. She looked at him quietly. Stenstrom was wearing a dark green Belmont coat and a pair of gold knee breeches, and a pair of shine Tyrol-style boots. So, what to pick? The lady or the demon? He could go back outside and fight the demon, and he would probably figure out a way to win. Or he could stay and speak with the young lady, offer his apologies, and escort her back to the manor house, where the demon would be dispelled. But then he would be caving into his mother's wishes, and that prospect galled him. After a few seconds of introspection, he chose the lady. Seemed the more sensible of the two. This whole situation was, in fact, not her fault. He removed his hat and approached. Her eyes were locked on him. He could feel them all the way across the room. "My lady," he said in a cheerful voice, still somewhat out of breath. I am sorry that my mother has wasted your time today, and on other occasions previously. She is determined to locate me a bride, and I have repeatedly informed her that I shall discover one on my own. I am sorry you have been inconvenienced today. Please allow me to escort you back to the manor." Lady Lillian said nothing, and slowly stood. "Good sir," she said after a lengthy pause, "this is my 3rd visit to House Belmont. This is the 3rd time I have journeyed across the marshes of Esther to come and make your acquaintance. I have been told by the great Lady Jubilee that there was a scheduling misadventure upon my first visit, and an urgent matter that required your immediate attention on my second." She paused. "Am I to infer that the great lady misspoke herself? There was no scheduling issue, was there? You were not called away on urgent business the second time, were you? I would appreciate an honest answer." Stenstrom looked down at the fine wood floor. Perhaps he should have selected the demon after all. You are correct, my lady. You simply did not wish to come in and see me? Is that it?" Stenstrom blushed. Yes, my lady, I am sorry. And again, it has nothing to do with you. It's an issue I have with my mother. I would like to offer my apologies." Lady Lillian seemed to tense up. "I am not interested in an apology, sir." She reached down behind the couch and drew a long, slim rapier. Have you a weapon? Stenstrom was shocked. I do not. You wish to have a duel, my lady? I do. I have been repeatedly insulted. I came here in good faith to meet a promising young gentleman whom I found rather handsome. Now, sir, I will have satisfaction. She began walking forward, her blue eyes flashing. I do not have a weapon. Then I shall simply deal you a minor wound and take my leave. I shall not be back, as you have proved yourself a lout and a bore. Stenstrom was stung. Well, I am neither a lout or a bore. I am offended. Lillian raised her rapier and thrust rather skillfully. Then I suggest you defend yourself. Stenstrom sidestepped her thrust and attempted to grab her by the shoulders. She wafted away in a gritty blast, rocking the chandelier. She appeared at the far end of the ballroom. Gifts? She has gifts. Stenstrom was impressed. I have been thoroughly trained by my brothers and my father, she called out, her voice echoing across the ballroom. I am your match and more. I suggest you simply take my satisfaction the way a man does, and I shall depart. Fall on the floor and bleed, sir, then I shall be appeased. Stenstrom looked to the door.
Come out here, Belmont!
He thought he heard the demon yell. He raised his left hand. With a vigorous bit of sleight of hand, 4 brightly colored stones appeared between his fingers. Do you know what these are? He asked. These are holy stones, and they may be cast for a variety of effects. Please, lower your weapon. Lillian was undeterred. I do not believe in Tyrol magic, she said, sidestepping to her right. Well, nor do I, Stenstrom said. However, here they are. I can blind you with them, or make you sneeze, or ruin your gown. Please, lower your weapon. I have wronged you. I readily admit it, and I wish to apologize.
Where's my apology, Belmont, for my empty belly?
The demon roared. Lillian feinted to her right and then applied a thrust, getting him slightly in the coat. I entreat you to use them, sir, she said. Use your stones. Do something with them. Stenstrom took a teal one and threw it to the floor, where it burst in a noisy flash. Lillian covered her eyes. How dare you? She cried, still covering her eyes. There was a huge crash of stone and glass. The demon had broken into the ballroom.
I am not going to have come all this way from the pit of hell, only to return to my poisoned stream with an empty stomach.
You stated your preconditions. I have not violated them.
I care not. I was summoned, and therefore treachery was summoned. I want you in my rotten belly, and I think I'll eat her too.
The demon, bounding on its fins and slashing with its catfish whiskers, pulled itself with a fuss into the ballroom. Lillian stood there with her sword and was horrified. What in the name of creation? Stenstrom threw a gray holy stone at the demon, where it burst into a grainy cloud around the demon's catfish face. It got the stuff in its gills and sneezed. It then cleared its gills with a blast of mucus dripping down the wallpaper.
So, a little pepper with my dinner? Well, that's fine.
Lillian backed away from the creature into the ballroom. She was incensed. So, you scoundrel! It took a summoned demon to get you in here with me today, did it? The demon lunged. Stenstrom backed into a corner and threw a sky-blue holy stone and hit it in the head. The demon immediately was covered in polka dots. Roaring with anger, it shot out with its whiskers and got Lillian around the waist. She dropped her rapier with a wood and metal clatter-thud. It opened its huge mouth to swallow her whole. Stenstrom shook his hand and threw 6 marziple daggers at the fiend, getting it in its bony fish head. It turned to Stenstrom with incredible speed, opened wide, and swallowed him whole. As he slid down the smelly, rotten gullet, a flash of cold steel suddenly ripped in. Lillian, with her little rapier, had sliced the demon in two, separating its head from its body, where it vanished back to wherever it came from, with a cry of misery. Stenstrom, covered in blood and slime, came climbing out of the remains. Lillian, holding her gory rapier, raised it. I'm going to make you wish you'd selected the demon today, Lord of Pigs, she said. She charged forward and was met with a freezing cascade of iced punch that had been set out on the table. Stenstrom, still dripping with demon slime and stinking of innards, was holding the now empty punch bowl. Lillian stood there open-mouthed, her face and gown covered in red punch, bits of pink-shaved ice trailing down the stainless blade of her rapier, mixing with the demon's blood in a dripping pool at her feet. She was aghast. "Villain!" she piped. They stood there looking at each other, Stenstrom holding the punch bowl and Lillian wide-eyed, her blue eyes standing out like two aquamarine wheels on a snowy pink landscape, punch dripping off of her. "Whoa, quite a pity," he said, still holding the bowl. "I was hoping to have a refreshing glass of punch just now after such vigorous activity." Surprisingly, Lillian smiled a little and gave a short laugh. And I usually enjoy my fish lightly breaded and seasoned with a hint of lemon." Soon they both laughed in earnest. Stenstrom, slimy, took Lillian dripping by the hand, and they went back to the manor on the hill to get her out of her wet-stained gown and he out of his ruined clothes. There she changed into a robe, and her gown was taken away to be cleaned by the staff. They chatted for the rest of the afternoon on the terrace overlooking the sea, and enjoyed a well-made lunch. The air cleared, and an experience shared. They warmed to each other. Despite himself and his desire to humble his mother, Stenstrom found this spirited woman from Gamboa to be well worth the adventure, and the "I told you so" he was sure to hear. She had proven that she was fiery, skilled, gifted, had a backbone, and a sense of humor as well. All things Stenstrom found rather admirable. "I'm sorry I chose to avoid you on your first two trips. Look at what company I missed out on," Stenstrom said, eating his lunch. Lily sat there in her fluffy robe and smiled. "Well, I'm glad I came again, and I'm glad I didn't stab you in the heart with my sword." Stenstrom thought about her rapier. "That was quite a blow you struck to the demon. It's the Martin, the Los Capricos weapon of my family. I'm not familiar with that one. It works just like a rapier, except when you get really mad, then it always cuts the head off of a victim." "Gods! Well, it's all right. I wasn't going to chop your head off, though I sort of wanted to at first." "I told you so." It was an amazing summer. Lillian of Gamboa was a grand hit around the Belmont Manor. "And you liked her, truly?" Lady Jubilee said, walking arm in arm through the garden paths with her son. For once they weren't fighting about something. They talked about Lily. Lady Jubilee was all smiles, something that didn't happen very often. "I did, Mother. She was beautiful, and she had a spirit to match." "Wonderful! Wonderful! You see, I have good taste. I would not have invited some awful bore or society fool to our home to dally with my son. I was certain you would find favor with her." Stenstrom looked down at his mother, silver-haired, sparkly-eyed, a bright smile. "I wonder, though, was it really necessary to summon a demon?" "A demon? Why, I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. The big, scary catfish you summoned to tear my soul apart. He half destroyed the chalk house." They stopped, and Jubilee put her hands on Stenstrom's face. "I care not about the antics that went on in the chalk house between the two of you. That can be fixed. My son, the last thing in the world I would want is for a demon to feast upon your soul. I have been guilty of subjecting you to bizarre things and putting you to steps some certain other young men have not had to face. The love of a Tyrolese mother can be severe." They reached the end of the path. Ahead, a coach came into view, floating down the lane. I have had the good fortune to have 30 wonderful children, 29 daughters, and 1 fine son. I can't imagine my life without any of you. Perhaps I am overprotective. Perhaps I impose my will on you too much. There are times when I'm in the wrong and need to be told as much. Your father is good for that. Of course, he's out chasing the stars again. The coach stopped at the gate, and Lillian of Gamboa got out, lit up in a fine teal gown, holding a small matching parasol to keep her out of the hot sun. But sometimes, Belle, I am right. Lily saw him and waved, and he waved back. I told you so. Lily's skill as a painter was obvious. She stood by the large canvas holding the brush. She looked at her subject with a careful eye. She mixed her paints and smoothed them onto the canvas with easy, learned strokes. She was painting a portrait of Stenstrom. She had been planning to give it to him as a future birthday present. She refused to let him see it. It was going to be a surprise. Stenstrom was lying there in the garden, naked, watching her paint. I hope you're not planning on giving me a nude portrait, Lily. I might have a hard time finding a place to hang it. Lily was also naked. It's not a nude, silly. They'd been lovers for some time now. Their rocky start well past them, their relationship quickly had escalated into a passionate one. Stenstrom lay back and looked at her naked body, partially obscured by the large canvas. So, Lily, would you really have struck me with your sword upon our first meeting? Oh, yes, I was hurt and angry. I wanted you to acknowledge me, so, yes, I think I would have stabbed you. Not to kill, if that means anything. I would have simply dealt you an agonizing wound. Yeah. She put her brush down and joined him on the couch. I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad we were able to find each other at last. It was worth the wait. They gazed at each other in the fading afternoon light. Well, I'm settled, Lily. I would like to announce ourselves. I am happy with you and want no other. She closed her eyes. Me? The first Countess of Belmont, South Tyrol? Would you accept such a distinction? She lay back and thought a moment. Right now, at this moment, yes. Yes, I would, gladly. But what? Well, just look at us, Belle. We're both still so young. There's so much we haven't seen or done. There's a whole league out there and beyond. If we committed to each other now, what if something else came around the corner? I'm not saying something will. I just want us both to know for certain. She saw the disappointment in Stenstrom's face. Oh, darling, please. I don't mean this as a rebuke or a rejection. I just want the both of us to be assured that when we commit to each other, that there will be no maybes and what ifs. I mean, how much do you really know about me? I know all I need to. You should be more careful with that, Belle. We all have our secrets, and I certainly have my share. She took him into her arms. Here's what I propose. Let us take 5 years. During that time, we may both choose to explore the world and the League at large as we will. If in that time we find something different or new, we may be free to explore it. I pray such a thing doesn't happen, but I cannot predict the future. I simply want it to be that when I give my heart to you, or you give yours to me, there will never be any question that we were meant for each other. Well, I don't want anyone else, Lily. She kissed him. Well, I pray that at the end of 5 years you still feel that same way. I don't want to lose you either. She took a deep breath. So, is this what it feels to be in love? It's wondrous. I don't want it to stop. Then let us present ourselves. She lay back. No, Belle. 5 years. Please. That is what I must ask of you. Stenstrom got up and approached the painting. No, Lily said. You promise not to look. She laid back, her naked breasts pointing up at the sky. I have a gift for you, Belle. I've been wanting to give it to you for some time now. She placed a small golden locket on a delicate chain in the dimple between her breasts and waited for him to take it. He picked it up. May I open it? He asked. Of course. Inside was a tiny picture of Lily's golden face, hand-painted and meticulous. "Did you paint this, Lily?" "I did, Belle. I've been working on it for some time. I wanted it to be perfect before I gave it to you. Do you like it?" "Oh, I love it. I'll carry it with me always." Lily beamed. He turned, cradling the locket in his hand, and went to fetch his clothes. A few minutes later, partially dressed, he returned. Lily lay prone on the couch. "Lily, will you stay for dinner this evening? Lily was gone. In her place was an intricate sculpture of her nude body in sand, perfect in every detail. Everything about it was perfect. The shape of her face, the curve of her legs, her soft, delicate feet. Lily often did this, disappearing at a moment's notice and leaving behind a wonderful sculpture of her likeness in sand. It amazed him how fast she could put these sculptures together. Such care and detail. Surely such a thing should take hours. But he'd only been gone a few minutes. The canvas of his portrait was gone too. Written in sand near her head in a fine cursive hand was, "Bye-bye." That was another thing Lily did on her departures. Bye-bye. Oh, Lily, he thought. He always felt so sad when she abruptly left like this. He got out the locket and stared at her beautiful face. "Bye, Lily. Don't be long." 5 years. A lot of things can happen in 5 years. Though he could probably expect to see much less of Lily around, she would, nevertheless, come to dominate his thoughts and his doings. Just as Stenstrom began to emerge from his mother's wing and openly challenge her, he replaced one domineering woman with another, Lily. Everything that happened from then on out, she had a hand in determining. Just like she could sculpt a statue of sand with effortless ease, she could sculpt him too. 5 years. And with that, we conclude the rather lengthy Chapter 13, Lillian of the Gamboa. So, you have met Lily at last. And, as I mentioned before, exactly what happens in this chapter is how I met my wife years ago. Demons, swords, the whole 9 yards. I shall have to tell you about it one of these days. Now, there's kind of a contradiction in here, but it's an intentional one. Again, I don't make mistakes. I don't forget things either. Lady Jubilee, in looking for a bride or a potential bride for Lord Stenstrom, said she wanted a mundane woman, one that was intelligent and skilled in social graces and whatnot, but was decidedly unarcane. She didn't want any gifts of the mind. She didn't want any magic use or sorcery, but Lily apparently has the gift of waft. That's at least one gift that she has. So Lily was supposed to be completely mundane and not have gifts of the mind, but apparently she's got them. Maybe she overlooked it, or maybe Lily kept it hidden. But there's no doubt about it. She can waft, as she demonstrated in the chalk house. And also, Stenstrom's mother, when he mentioned the demon, she seemed surprised. Like, a demon? Why would I send a demon for my son's soul? I love my son. I love you. Despite the various things that she's done to him in the past with the blood promise and the knife in the chest, she's usually not much of a liar. If she was summoning demons, she would admit it. So where did this demon come from? Who sent it? That is the question going forward that you have to contemplate. So we've met Lily, and we will be seeing her regularly throughout the rest of Part 2 here, and in Part 3. Next week, Chapter 14, A Question of Occupation. So we're going to see how Stenstrom was set upon his current path that turns him into a paymaster, a clerk. And we'll see the genesis of that next week. In a rather humorous chapter. I think it's funny. I think I have a good sense of humor. You might disagree on that, but in any event, we'll prepare to have a good laugh next week. Chapter 14, A Question of Occupation. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.